Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the board's October 23rd and 24th, 2018 board meeting. My name is Victor Law, the president of the board. As I call this meeting to order, I would like to advise all members of the public, both present or watching the meeting's webcast, that the board is a consumer protection agency subject to the Opening Meetings Act. Members of the board may be using an electronic copy of the meeting materials. Please be advised that such members are using their devices for this purpose and are not communicating with each other via email or other electronic means. Given the start time of the meeting today, the board will not be taking a lunch break. Tomorrow, the board intends to take a lunch if the business of the board can accommodate such a break. And I would like to remind everyone present who is interested in receiving continuing education credit to remember to sign in and out on the designated sheet in the back of the room. Now, the meeting is being webcast. We respectfully request that when called upon to speak, please come to the speaker's table and speak directly into the microphone. This will ensure those individuals watching the webcast are aware of all discussion and actions. It would be appreciated if you would identify yourself and any organization you represent, but that is not required. As indicated on the agenda, there are several items where the board may convene in closed session. When such action occurs, the public presented at the physical location must leave the room and the webcasting will stop. Should closed session occur at the end of the day, the board will reconvene in open session to recess or adjourn the meeting. Reconvening the open session solely to recess or adjourn after a closed session may not be webcast. Well, I thank you all for the attending, and I look forward to a productive meeting. Now, I would like to take a roll call and establish a quorum. So let's start with my left-hand side over here.
Albert Wong, professional member.
Ricardo Sanchez, public member.
Alan Shad, professional member.
And I'm Victor Law, professional member.
Greg Lippy, public member.
Lavanza Butler, professional member.
Maria Serpa, professional member.
Debbie Veal, professional member.
Shirley Kim, public member.
Okay, thank you all, and the quorum is established. Let's move on to agenda item number 2, public comments on items not on the agenda or agenda items for future meetings. Please come up.
Rafi Simonian, I'm a pharmacist, and I would like the board to consider agendizing for the January board meeting an agenda item regarding the waivers for sterile compounding facilities. The background on it is that the board established a waiver process, and there's currently 400 waivers out there. And a number of the individuals are having difficulty completing the waiver projects with the December 2019 timeframe coming. And so we wanted the board to consider having a discussion with the stakeholders on this to see where they're at and what their challenges are. Some of the challenges are financial. So I used to work at UC San Diego until June 28th of this year. And so the project, there were 2 projects there. The initial estimate for the project was $2.3 million for the 2 projects. Now it's up to $4.5 million to complete the projects. They're trying to get the funding, but that's what's happening. All the UC hospitals are in the same boat, and we're guessing a lot of the other folks in California are in the same boat. In California, construction in healthcare facilities is very challenging because it has to go through multiple regulatory levels with the state. But we do want to protect our staff and serve our patients. And so that's why we would like to dialogue with the board about the best way to do that. I understand the board's hands are tied somewhat because There's other agencies involved besides, there's the federal government, USP, there's OSHPD in the state of California, there's Cal-OSHA. So where the board could mitigate some of this and make sure that progress is being made to serve patients and protect the employees of pharmacies, I think that's an important thing. I think it's a great thing we're doing this, but if the board could discuss it before the December deadline, that way it won't precipitate an emergency in December.
Okay. All right.
Now, did you have a forum that you want, a way that you wanted to do this? I mean, it sounds like a good idea. I definitely needed that. I agree with you. And would just add a board meeting after discussion?
Yeah.
When you said the dialogue, you know, that probably a prolonged discussion on this with nobody happy. So.
Well, actually, you know, with dialogue, you know, my thought about dialogue is that once you establish a dialogue, you decrease the stress level by 50%, because for people to unload what's happening to them and for you guys to hear it. I don't know what I'm going to defer to the executive officer, the board staff, and the president, because I don't know what the best forum to do it, whether it's in a committee structure or in a full board meeting structure, but it would be nice for all the board members to hear it. And then potentially at the end of that discussion, it could be delegated to one of the committees. So.
Yeah, we have a compounding committee that especially deal with that issue.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe it probably takes shorter time to pick up on the compounding committee than to the full board meeting.
Sure. Whatever the board feels in their best, you know, I just wanted to highlight the problem so that people could start dealing with earlier in the year versus when all these things are due, and then they're going to have to come up with mitigation strategies which could affect patient care.
And I'm sorry, what did you say the deadline is?
So the board initially had a deadline of approximately the beginning of this year, but then that got extended because of the, you know, a lot of people couldn't comply. So USP 800, which is the hazardous medication handling update, that's supposed to go into effect on December 1st, 2019. And so the board made that the deadline, I believe.
The actual deadline was when the regs took effect was January 2017. We granted construction waivers to allow the modifications to existing facilities so that they could do the extensive modernization needed. And those were going to run, about a year ago, the board, when USP was modified, the board agreed to push all activation dates back for the construction waivers and for compliance with USP 800 to December 2019.
Correct.
But the goal is compliance now. It's just if you need construction in order to become compliant, and a lot of these requirements require construction, the board agreed to grant construction waivers for purposes of mitigating the impact on patient health and welfare.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. Any other comment? Come on up.
Good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
Steve Gray, pharmacist. I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I said this morning at the Legislation Committee. I would like at the next board meeting, and if necessary subsequent board meetings, for the full board to have a discussion on new legislation which puts new requirements on the board or new requirements on pharmacists and pharmacies. And the reason for that is that if there are new requirements, it gives the ability for the board members to have a policy discussion on what the strategy should be for education, the strategy for enforcement, the strategy for licensing, etc., before there's actual cases that come before the board. Because all of you know that when you get actual cases, then it gets hard to have a discussion with any detail. And so I've asked this to be put on the Enforcement Committee meeting, which I think is coming up in December. But I think that if they come up with something, then I think it needs to allow enough time and the full discussion by the board members of things that might need to be discussed regarding, you know, changes in law, new laws, and new responsibilities. And I want to add something. This used to be the tradition at the Board of Pharmacy, 20 years ago or so, where there was a discussion by the Enforcement Committee, usually in December or late November, after they knew what laws were going into effect. And then they could have that discussion and report out in January, and the full board could take action. And one of the things, I'll give you an example of why that was so important. There was a new law all about impairment, mental, physical, or substance impairment. And the law was signed to a little bit of a surprise and some changes made late in the legislative session. And at the December meeting of the Enforcement Committee concluded that it was basically unenforceable and it wasn't going to work the way, and it needed a relatively minor but important tweak. And when they reported that out in January, the full board voted to sponsor legislation to make the tweak, to make it work. And then while that process was going on, they didn't have to enforce that particular aspect of it. And it was just super important because it would have caused a lot of problems for patients, for physicians, for others, the way it was originally written. So I think that tradition would be important to go back to, and I'd like to ask that some time be allotted at the next full board meeting to have that discussion, and hopefully by then the Enforcement Committee, maybe even licensing or other committees, will have a chance to have some discussion about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, come up.
Hi, everybody. Holly Strom, former board member, pharmacist. I just brought this up in Ledge Reg, and I wanted to bring it up in front of the full board, and that is a future agenda item to revisit the naloxone furnishing requirements that are currently in regulation. The impetus for providing the naloxone furnishing was to get more naloxone into the hands of consumers, and the board's requirements have turned out to be an onerous barrier to furnishing of naloxone. And so I'd really like those requirements to be revisited.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask you which requirements you're referring to?
The ones that are in regulation.
Well, yeah, but I mean specifically which requirements are you referring to?
The requirements for furnishing naloxone.
Okay. Is it the CE? Is it the
No,
handout?
it's not the CE. It's not the CE. That's not a problem. It's not the handout. It's the time it takes to do everything that's required in front of the patient. That's taking some people upwards of 45 minutes. I'm on the SafeMed LA Opioid Safety Coalition in Los Angeles County. And we do reports every month when we meet, and there's just been no increase in the number of pharmacists furnishing naloxone. And they all say we just don't have time to do what the board requires us to do. And a number of large pharmacists have been reporting to me and others on the committee that the same thing's happening or isn't happening to them. And I'm just concerned that we're not getting naloxone into the hands of the people that need it.
So you're looking at simplifying the procedures to finish?
Yeah, well, just have a look at it and see if we can.
Okay, all right, thank you. Come on, Danny.
Good afternoon, board members. Danny Martinez, California Pharmacists Association. This is not on the agenda, so, or at least I don't think it is, but one of the things on behalf of some of our members that we discussed at the last enforcement committee meeting, we'd like to bring up as a separate agenda item for a future either board meeting or enforcement meeting, and that is the issue of pre-enforcement meetings. I know this has been talked about at length, and I think we should still continue to discuss. There was some confusion last time when we were talking about inserting, perhaps board members or the board itself within administrative hearings. But what we're talking about, and I want to be crystal clear about this, is that we'd like to see an option happen where there's a disciplinary matter where the accused is afforded an opportunity prior to actual enforcement to be able to state his or her case that can result in either a voluntary take of probation so that they don't have to go through the lengthy process of what is being seen right now, lengthy and costly. And so I just ask that item be agendized so that we can have a full discussion on that.
Thank you, Dan. Anybody else? Okay, if not, let's move on to agenda item number 3. Is the approval of the July 24th and 25th, 2018 board meetings minutes. Board members, can you take a look at the minutes to see if there's any corrections or amendment? Anything? If not, the motion by Greg? Second by, actually, Ricardo, I can't see. All right. Okay, all right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? You gotta raise your hand? Yeah. All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, opposed? Sustain? Okay, thank you. Minutes is approved.
Did everybody vote? Did you see? Okay, thank you. Sorry,
You-
I missed
you
that
get
hand on
everybody?
the end, so.
All right.
Got it. Thank you.
Let's move on to agenda item number 4, approval of the September 7th, 2018 board meetings minutes. All right, board members, any corrections or amendment?
This is Maria Serpa with a correction on page 2 of 7. The second paragraph where it lists a public member of the public, excuse me, to insert the name Kathy Besink.
Is it wrong spelling?
No, you said insert the name. It's
Insert
not
the
there.
name, there's no name.
Oh, it's no name. Oh, okay. All right. Any other corrections? Seeing none.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Greg,
Second.
second by Levanza Shaw.
Before you vote, I
Yes.
assume that motion to approve is with the correction?
Motion to approve with the corrections.
That's fine.
Are you okay with that, Shaw?
Yes.
All right. And all those in favor, please raise your hand.
Public comment? Before you vote, we'll just take
Oh.
public comment, sorry.
Public comment? All right, seeing none. All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Oppose? Sustain?
Actually, I'm going to abstain because I was not at that meeting.
Yeah, okay. You could raise your hand when you abstain. Okay, 2 abstention. All right, minutes is approved. And also, agenda item number 5, the approval of September 26, 2018 board meetings minutes. All right, board members?
Maria Serpa with a couple of corrections on page 3 of 5. The easy one is the correction of the name Candace Fong. That's F like in Frank, O-N-G. And her name is listed several places.
Oh, instead of PH, it should be, oh, okay, wrong spell. Okay.
And the
Sorry.
The second correction is the paragraph above that where it refers to myself as board member and compounding pharmacist. I'd like to strike and compounding pharmacist because that's not my job title.
Okay, just board member.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marie. Any other corrections? If not, motion to approve as amended. Oh, you wasn't there, okay.
I'll move.
Moved by Debbie, second by Ricardo. Any public comments? If not, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Oppose? Sustain? Abstain? 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 All right, okay, so minutes is approved. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 6. Recognition and celebration of pharmacist license in California for 50 years. I understand we have one here today, right? Okay, please come up. We could use the microphone here. Okay, could you tell us your name and about your schooling and career?
Okay, Stan Goldenberg, career in long-term care pharmacy, spent a few years on the board of pharmacy, which I may say is probably what I consider to be the capstone of my career. President of the board for a couple years also, and most of my activity has been in long-term care pharmacy, senior care pharmacy, but a variety of other businesses also involving pharmacy. But I look back on this and I remember sitting with Virginia and figuring out how we can create a 50-year certificate. And now I look back on this and I say to myself, now I look back on this and say, where did the time go to? It's been a source of pride for myself to watch other pharmacists be recognized for 50 years of service. And I thank you very much for all the activities that you guys have done to make the board as good as it is, and to Victor for his leadership also. So, thank you very much.
Do you have any family members that with you today, or?
No.
No? Okay. If not, now, I have a pin here on behalf of the California State Board of Pharmacy. We'd like to thank you for your years of service to the profession.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Holly, do you want to be in it too? Are you sure? Okay.
But if you don't mind,
Yes, anyone you want.
can I ask this young lady to
Young
join
lady,
us?
come up.
With my pleasure.
Okay, right. How's that?
Perfect.
Is that because he called you a young lady, or?
I'll take it when I can get it. Whatever.
I won't interrupt this one, but I'd like a picture with you Tuesday.
Okay, look over here first, then you can look at Holly. All right, 1, 2.
Oh, wait a minute.
Sorry, one more.
One more for the home.
Okay. Got it.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor.
You have another one?
Sure. So he already has got his pin, but he didn't get a chance to go to a board meeting before.
Sure.
Come on up, we'd love to hear from you.
No, coming up. Could you tell everyone what's your name and about your career?
My name is Aaron Wirtz. I'm a pharmacist, hospital, retail for 40 years, hospital for about 12, 14 years before that, and that's about it.
So 50 years.
Well, it's about 55 years now. That's why I say I never got here before.
All right, let's take a picture though for the script since you were able.
We'll give you back a pen.
Give you another one. All right, ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Yeah, my wife
All right, let's move on to another recognition. Okay, this is recognition of our executive officer. She's going to retire at the end of the year. Okay, Ginny Harrow, it's your time to come up.
I was just
And actually, we have some members present here would come up and say some good words about Ginny. Come on up, Stan, Holly. Okay, all right, one at a time.
All right, well, I've known Ginny since 1991 when I came onto the board, and she was the assistant EO at the time. And I just was amazed about her knowledge and everything that she knew about state government and the legislative process. But you know, this lady has dedicated her career to serving the public. She's dedicated her life to making sure the consumers of the California are safe, given endless hours. Now, I'll give you an example. Every year after I got off the board, I would make it a point to have dinner with her and Kelsey's mom, who was the executive officer at the time. And what would we talk about? Would we talk about family? No. Would we talk about what you're doing? No. But it would go right to the board activities. And 24/7, this is on Ginny's mind. And we're losing an amazing asset to the state, but I know she's going to be very happy moving on. And I just congratulate her for 39 years of service to the state of California. I think 35 to the Board of Pharmacy approximately, or?
It just seems like 35, it's only 29.
29, okay. But really, we're so thankful to have worked with you, Ginny, and you've been an amazing asset, and thank you for everything you've done.
I don't know where to start with you. I had the honor of working with Ken Schell as what Victor's now going through in a selection committee once Patty decided to move on. And things just worked out extremely well. I can't tell you how much the people of California appreciated your work, the profession of pharmacy appreciated your work, and for myself. I just think you're dandy. I just couldn't imagine somebody doing a better job. But I know that you have the same feelings that we all have for the passion of protecting the consumer. And on a personal basis, I thank you for the guidance that you gave me and the board members that I served with to help move pharmacy into a better place than what it was before you came. So thank you very, very much.
Well, Jenny, I echo everything they've said, and I've had the pleasure and the honor of working with you for many, many years, as you both know, and working with you early on all the legislation and regulation stuff, and then later on, of course, as executive officer. And most of the people in the audience probably know this, but you know, as a past president of the American Society of Pharmacy Law, this lady has a national reputation for being a leader in pharmacy, a leader in executive officers. She's a frequently invited speaker at those functions. And so your reach has actually gone well beyond California, well beyond the patients of California and the profession. So not only for California do we thank you, but for leading the profession in many, many ways. And I wish there was a way, or maybe we can create from the Legislative Committee an honorary pharmacist official position or something like that, that really reflects your dedication and your passion for your job, for the patients, and for the profession. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Hi, everybody. Holly Strom. I just want to say to whatever Steve and Rafi and Stan already said, I agree, totally agree with. And there's some people on the phone who would like to say some things to you. So, you guys ready? Oh, you are ready. Okay. Whoever's first, go.
Okay, this is John Jones, and one thing that I really say about Ginny is not only does she understand pharmacy, much like what a pharmacist who really wants to practice pharmacy in the very best way would, but she's also focused on the consumer, and she's tough and smart. And she managed to always balance the consumer interests with all the interests of the various parties. And it wasn't always popular, but she was really strong in protecting those consumer interests. And again, tough and really smart, and someone that I always want to counsel when we're faced with tough decisions. And, you know, what should we do as a board? Ginny always had very sound counsel.
Okay, who's next, guys?
Hi, Jenny. This is Ken Schell, part of the Jenny and Kenny show. I can't tell you how I feel I did my duty to the state of California. We exceeded expectations when Stan and I offered you to the board as executive officer, which you served with distinction and expertise for so many years. I think time and again the governor's office and legislature recognized that the Board of Pharmacy was one of the most highly functioning regulatory boards they had.
Thank you very much, Kim. And John, thank you too.
Okay, guys, I'm going to hang up now.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joshua Room. I'm the board's liaison counsel from the Attorney General's office. And I just wanted to say something about the 15 years that I've spent with Ginny as my primary client for this board. This is a sad moment for me as an enforcement representative because I feel like the state of California is losing a primary protector of the public protection at this point. Ginny is by far the hardest working state employee I've ever experienced in my life. And I think Ginny's tenure has been marked by never taking the easy path, by always fighting for what she believed was right, even when it was unpopular, even when her own board members may not have been so in favor of it, and being the conscience of the board and pushing it towards more difficult decisions. One of the reasons I wanted to stand up when Stan was speaking was that the board endured a huge wave of national calumny when California led the way on the electronic pedigree law, but got the federal government to finally step up and do something about that. The compounding regulations in California have really been a nation leader. As Steve pointed out, Ginny has a national reputation. I hear from states all over the country about what is California doing on this issue? What is California doing on this issue? So Ginny has often pushed me in my own cases to do things that are harder than I wanted to do. She never, ever stops working, never, ever stops trying to protect the people of California. I have a deep and abiding respect for her intelligence, for her humor, and most of all, for her drive that never lets any of us rest. Thank you.
And on behalf of other board members, we have a plaque here for her. It says, presented to Virginia K. Harrow in recognition of 28 years of dedicated service to the board and to California patients. Thank you for your commitment to consumer protection.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 8, the discussion and consideration of board's strategic plan, including the committee recommendations for changes to committee goals. Okay, let me give you a little background here. During the October 26 and 27, 2016 meeting, the board approved its current strategic plan. Historically, The board has conducted an annual review of its plan. The strategic plan is intended to be a living document and updated to reflect changes in board priorities that may result from changes in the marketplace and legislation, etc. In preparation for this annual review, each of the committees review the strategic goal areas for their respective areas. The committees review the status of each goal and determine if additional goals should be incorporated into the plan. Provided below is the goal statement for each of the committees. During the committees, the meeting, members will have the opportunities to review the status of the plan as well as recommended changes being offered by the committee. So number one is the licensing committee. So I'll let Debbie, the chair of the licensing committee, to talk about that part. Debbie?
Okay. Get it open just a second. Thank you. So at the last licensing committee, we reviewed all of the our current strategic plan goals and made some recommendations and potential changes. Victor, did you want me to read through each one of them?
Yeah, I think so, please.
Our goal number one is research and identify issues that result from unlicensed vendors in the marketplace to proactively maintain patient safety and health. Our current status is that our executive officer serves on MEPBP's Pharmacy Task Force and provides updates on the national efforts to address unlicensed internet pharmacy sales. So everything that's, we felt this was obviously something we wanted to continue as part of our activity to, going forward. Number two is implementation of an online application and license renewal and fee payment for applicants and licensees to improve the licensing conveniences. The board is currently working with the department to secure the ability to accept credit card payments for renewed payments. Further, the board is in the initial stages of a business modernization, the process used to evaluate legacy computer systems. And I think we've heard from the licensees and the public probably for years, maybe prior to myself being on the board, that we do lag in the ability to do licensing electronically and to being able to take, credit card payments electronically. So please know that we are well aware and working diligently to try to correct that. However, at this point, our board staff, is involved, and there isn't a system right now that we can embrace, but we're working to get there.
Well, last I heard, I think beginning in 2019, they could use the credit card to renew the Nexus. So this is coming up.
Okay, so they can use their credit cards online?
2019, yeah.
That's great. Number three, complete a comprehensive review of at least 5 licensure categories and update requirements to ensure relevancy and keep licensing requirements current with professional practice. This is something actually, if you attend any of the licensing committee meetings, which by the way are very interesting and you really are missing by not being there. Riveting, as my co-board member here said, but this is really a key part of what the licensing committee needs to do. Is we need to not only look through all the licensing activities, but making sure that what we have in regulation is appropriate. Post-implementation review of the advanced practice pharmacist is underway. Occupational analysis is underway for both the currently recognized pharmacy technician certification exam, and regulation changes are pending to update the training requirements. So we look at the jobs of these folks and make sure that we have the right regulation around these activities. And review of the hospital pharmacy practice was evaluated and legislative changes secured to establish satellite compounding pharmacies. The board has started to receive hospital satellite compounding licensure applications for licensure. Number 4, 1.4, explore and possibly implement opportunities to use contracted organizations to administer the board's California Practice Standards and Jurisprudence, also known as CPJE, exam to increase access to examination. No action's been taken on this goal at this time. Please know that we're discussing it, but it's not an easy thing to do, and we're not positive that it's that is actually the route we're going to do. That's why it says explore. So we are continuing to explore. We aren't ready to let go of, but we are continuing to explore if we should try to broaden the place to get to the exams. 1.5, improve the application process for new licensees, including providing informational resources directed towards the applicants to offer more guidance around the application process. Once again, if you are filling out an application, you'll notice we have information with the application that helps, so that hopefully the first time you fill out the application, you get all the information in there correctly, and we're not doing the back and forth. Trust us, we do not enjoy sending deficiency letters back to people and saying, oopsie, you forgot number 5. And so what we're trying to do very hard is to give you tips on how to fill out that application so that the first time it's right. And we can really get at what we're trying to do here, license either the person, the facility, or whatever, and not the back and forth. It takes a lot of our staff time going back and forth. We really do. If it's a legitimate practice, if you're the right person to be applying for the license, we really do want you. But we do need to have the information that's in the application. So we're trying very hard and constantly reviewing those documents to see if there's something we can do better. 1.6, establish requirements to form a licensing process for alternative work sites, vendors, and the pharmacy marketplace to advance patient safety and health safety. Currently, statutory changes allow for the use of the ADDS machines. Is awaiting signature by the governor. He signed it, right? Yeah. So that was, I know that's something that we think is very exciting, and kind of pushing forward in the practice of pharmacy and being able to serve the public in California. 1.7, identify opportunities to expand electronic interfaces with licenses to allow for online application renewal, which I think I talked about a little bit earlier. I kind of overlapped the paying the bill part. But that is once again something that our staff is working very diligently with the department on our business modernization. And we did add 2 new goals. One was implementation of some new licensing programs, as well as performing an annual benchmark with national practice standards. So looking at our licensing categories versus other national practices to make sure that we aren't missing some stuff that maybe is happening out there, or keeping relevant.
Okay. All right. Do we have any public comments? Come up, Steve.
Steve Gray, pharmacist. I'd like to compliment the licensing committee, first of all, on having a really good discussion at their last meeting about all of this and how important it was. And I think that's reflected in the fact that they have, many standards already, and they're actually proposing more, and I think that's excellent. I would like to comment on the proposed new 1.9, perform a benchmarking with national practice standards. I don't want to get lost in that discussion. The fact that that benchmarking should also reflect not only the licensing standards, but the scope of practice standards and scope of practice advances that are happening in other states and jurisdictions. And maybe, or maybe not, does there need to be anything done with licensing. But as we see things happening in other states that are beyond the traditional scope of practice, that are enriching and making safer healthcare in the country, I think that needs to be brought back to the board for discussion. And not necessarily do any of those things require legislation or regulation, but the board should be aware that pharmacists are doing these things in other states. They may start doing them in California, and there needs to be a recognition then of what the board's role is, if anything, but at least the knowledge. So not just their licensing standards, but their whole scope of practice. I would recommend that be modified to make sure that that's not lost in the process. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any other public comments? All right. Thank you, Debbie, for your work. Let's move on to the enforcement.
Before we go on to the most important one here, with the...
Wait. You have to get licensed before you can enforce, so not necessarily.
Thank you.
Hey, Alan, your mic's not on.
Oh, okay. So my question is here, with these changes, these additions, does the board have to accept this? Do we have to move?
Yes. Yes,
So should we
because
do
this-
this at the end or after each section?
That's up to the president about how, if you want to do
Well,
each committee.
let's go through each of these first, and then you could take up the comment with each committee. Okay.
All right.
So after the licensing committee, now the next step is the enforcement committee, which is chaired by Alan. So it's your turn, Alan.
All right, Gary. So we have seven goals that were in the sunset plan, and we have 4 more. Now I want you to pay attention because the 4 that we're going to add are really interesting. Okay. 2.1, implement processes to shorten cycle times from investigation to resolution of cases, with special focus on prioritized critical cases to minimize patient harm and enhance consumer protection. As part of the meetings, the Enforcement Committee is receiving information on investigations and efforts currently underway to reduce such times. And we have reduced the times. We have metrics now, and we had a report in, I think, the July meeting that showed a tremendous reduction in times, an increase in efficiency, and an increase in the number of people working on it. We had a report from Josh that was rather depressing on how we couldn't really speed up the times as much as we like due to the process that's involved. And I think that was educational for everybody, that there are barriers that we just can't push against. 2.2, strengthening patient consultation outcomes for Californians and increased medication safety. This is something that we've struggled with for years, ever since the omnibus bill was first passed. The enforcement of consultation is difficult, and we always feel that we haven't encouraged it or allowed for it to happen enough. So the efforts are being taken continually on this, and we have a variety of settlements that we hope will gain better compliance. 2.3, we're supposed to collect data to report to board members about enforcement trends that are presented at case closures, so the board can better educate licensees about board priorities. And this kind of dovetails with, I think, Steve's comment about letting the licensees know what is to be expected from them. 2.4, evaluate industry technology trends to develop further regulatory infrastructures that promote patient safety. The board convened a technology summit on the use of automated drug delivery systems, evaluated findings of a pilot project. We've been the scourge of UCSD, who's here to report again. And we're currently sponsoring the legislation to establish a regulatory framework for ADDs, as well as expand conditions when the devices can be used. 2.5, evaluate the disciplinary process and initiate process improvements for enhanced efficiency and effectiveness. This is further expanded in the soon-to-be-read 2.10 recommendation. Okay. We're going to collaborate with stakeholders to identify and expand resources for technicians who experience substance abuse to provide assistance in recovery. This is particularly important when we have discipline cases upon discipline cases about technicians who need help and experience substance abuse. However, to fit them into the recovery program is overwhelmingly expensive. So this is something we're going to have to focus on. 2.7, investigate options on the interoperability with the National Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, the PDMPS. We've got legislation secured to ensure that cures will integrate with this. And now, what you've all been waiting for, 4 new proposals here. 2.8, to develop a process to submit complaints about inspectors anonymously and report back to the board. We've had a number of suggestions on how to do this, and so we're looking forward to this goal. 2.9, assess collateral consequences of discipline and research options. We've, throughout the past year, we've been educated on the collateral consequences of what is seemingly straightforward disciplinary processes that have caused undue stress in lots of the people that have been disciplined. We are going to evaluate the board citation and fine program. This has already started. And then we're going to review the role and the responsibility of the PIC. And this is something that's been needed for a long time, and I think it's an appropriate time to do that.
All right. Do we have any public comments?
So under proposed 2.9, I'd like to add, I'd like to see if we can add, assess the collateral consequences of both pre and post discipline. Excuse me. It goes in line to what I was talking about earlier about the need for pre-conferences or assessing discipline or getting to the discipline before it becomes this whole process. So if we could please add after consequences of pre and post.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Before we move on that subject, I think the potential there is that may require a very different type of intervention for the committee to consider. So I don't know if maybe if the board is interested in taking that, it might be a separate goal, might be more appropriate.
Well,
to evaluate it, a discussion of it, yeah. I know that it's
because there's
there,
ramifications of adding that pre in there that
it would involve some statutory changes, I believe, and so the implications are it's a very different perspective, I think.
Yes.
We talked about it.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Laura Churns, and I'm with Albertsons Companies. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the board for really working on a solution to reduce the turnaround time for cases. I know our company has experienced a lot of challenges with some of these cases being brought before us, years later, often 3-4 years after the fact. And, at that point, really a lot of the key personnel have either left the company or moved on or forgot key important details, therefore leaving us with a knowledge gap and, difficult to defend. So really appreciate you guys looking into this. I urge you to continue working on it and really, to improve efficiencies on both ends. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We are trying.
Thanks.
Trying is one thing, right? Getting it done is another. All right, any other public comment? All right, now, thank you, Alan. All right, let's move on to the Legislation and Regulations Committee, which is chaired by Greg.
Which is, without a doubt, the most important committee. Now, our strategic goals are basically to continue the strategic goals that we've been achieving since, well, over the 9.5 years that I've been on the board. To begin with, to educate the board on national pharmacy initiatives impacting the consumer and the future of pharmacy, to strategize the board's efforts in alignment with where the profession is going to be in the year 2020. 2, to support legislative and regulation proposals from board approval to enactment to effectuate the goals of the board. Last fiscal year, 5 regulations took effect. Further, at the end of this legislative year, 1 board-sponsored measure and 5 board-originated measures were signed by the governor. 3, advocate for or against legislation that impacts the board's mandate for consumer protection. During the legislative year, the board established support positions on 10 measures and opposed positions on 3. 4, establish a systematized ongoing review process for board regulations to improve and maintain clear and relevant regulations. Board staff and council are working to improve the quality of regulation packages, including ensuring regulation language is clear, consistent, and necessary. And that's it.
All right. Do we have any public comments? Seeing none. Well, thank you very much, Greg. All right, let's move on to the Communication and Public Education, which is chaired by Ricardo. Ricardo, please.
I've been most of it. It's a little lengthy here, but here we go. But important, but very important. We basically met October 11th. We met October 11th, 2018, and we had a discussion of a proposal by Chapman University School of Pharmacy Group to require a warning label on prescription containers for chemotherapy medications.
Oh, Ricardo, we're only talking about the goals.
The what?
Only the goals, the 4, only the 8 goals, not the report on the committee.
Hold on, I was going to go right into my report.
No, not the report.
Yes, I was. Okay.
There's 2 pages.
I was ready to go into it. The status here it is. Okay, communication publication. Develop and implement a communication plan for licensees and consumers to improve communication and keep these stakeholders better informed. Status, the committee approved a communication plan and at its September 2016 meeting in accordance with the board's strategic plan goal to educate consumers, licensees, and stakeholders about the practice and regulation of the profession. Identify and use additional resources for public and licensee outreach services to implement the communication plan. Status. The board reinstated the Ask an Inspector program for licensees. The board also sponsors CE training events throughout the state and has created webinars for law and ethics, CE, and naloxone training. In addition, staff is proposing the use of social media to expand communications with the general public. We'll keep going on. Establish a process to collect email addresses and mobile numbers for text messaging from all licensees for better ability to improve communication status. The board has expanded its email notification program. In addition to facilitates and pharmacists, the board now also requires pharmacy technicians, intern pharmacists, and designated representatives to register email addresses to receive official notices. Provide implementation guidance on newly enacted changes to pharmacy law by publishing summaries and explaining implementation tactics. Status. The board is providing extensive guidance on the inventory reconciliation regulation through facts and questions, newsletter articles, and live CE training forums. The board also has published on its website facts and questions about compounding, drug take-back programs, and SB 493. Inspect pharmacies at least once every 4 years to provide a forum for licensing inspector communication and education in practice settings. Status of the board. Inspectors are working to meet this goal by adjusting schedules and workloads to increase the frequency of routine inspections. Communicate the availability of new or specified pharmacy services and locations so that the public is aware of pharmacies that can meet their needs. Status. The board has developed an online search tool to help consumers find local pharmacies that offer drug take-back services. Revise consumer facing materials, posters, point to your language notices, television messages, to achieve better consumer understandings of their rights and optimal use of medications. Status. The board has updated it. Counterfeit prescription drugs brochure, which warns consumers about the dangers of buying drugs online. Educating the board on national pharmacy initiatives impacting consumer and the future of pharmacy. Pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, distributors, etc., to strategize the board's efforts in alignment with where the profession is going to be in 2020. Status. The board's executive officer provides updates to the board's for the board's discussions occurring at the national level. Support legislation and regulation proposals from board approval to enhancement to effectuate the goals of the board. Status. Last fiscal year, 5 regulations took effect. Further at the end. Oh, too much. Okay. Well, okay. I went on too much. It's the wrong side. I think we're done. They were.
That's it.
I went on to the wrong one.
That's it, yeah. Okay, do we have any public comments?
Public comment. A little bit of a rich.
And I think we have done a lot with this public ed committee also. Bear in mind that the inspection that we ask for every 4 years is not to come out here and give you guys a hard time, because I think we have spoken to the inspector. This is more for educational purposes. That's the main goal for the one of the board. And you find out that most of the recent visit by the inspector that I have here really comments, the inspector come out and they're really doing a good job in educating the pharmacists to be compliant rather than giving them a hard time. That's part of the goal that we want to accomplish this year. So I think Ricardo is doing a good job in making sure that that's happening. All right, seeing none, let's move on to the next committee, which is the Organization Development Committees, which is mine. All right, goal number 1 is to conduct a full annual review of the board's strategic plan to monitor progress. So the annual review of the board's strategic plan will occur during this board meeting, is what we are doing right now, which we're doing. So goal number 2 is to provide leadership training opportunities to managers to expand their skills and to improve performances. The status right now is all the management staff, they completed True Colors and training on the Unruly Civil Rights Act. In addition, individual members of the management team also completed the following training. They had leadership fundamentals, leader as communicators, creating effective teams, regulations process, putting the pieces together. They have performance management, labor relations for managers and supervisors, strategic management, hiring and onboard new employees, investigative subpoenas, preparation and delegation, safety, wellness and accommodations, effective business writing, and also the CSHP and Touro University Sterile Compounding Refresher course. Goal number 3 is to expand annual individual development plans for staff to promote growth and development. So currently, 33 individual development plans were provided to inspector staff and 15 office staff. Goal number 4 is to collaborate with the Department of Consumer Affairs to explore the feasibility of procuring electronic management tools to increase efficiencies and reduce reliance on papers. The status right now, the board has completed the preliminary stage of business modernization, which will replace legacy systems as well as include workflow, design improvement, and scanning management. Our goal number 5 is to maintain procedure manuals to capture institution knowledge and enable consistent operations. Current status, the inspector training manual is currently under review, and also standardized training plans were developed and are used to onboard new staff. Goal number 6 is to establish customer service metrics to track board efforts to meet customers' expectations. So right now we have 48 post-inspection surveys were conducted by supervising inspectors. Goal number 7, evaluation options for improvement of licensing renewal processes to allow for online renewal. And board staff is in collaboration with the DCA looking for a vendor to facilitate credit card renewal payment via an online portal, which I mentioned earlier is happening in 2019. And goal number 8 is in collaboration with the executive officer to ensure appropriate resources for board issues relating to staff activities and development. So our field staff actually completed the CSHP and Touro University Sterile Compounding Refresher course. The current goal, future goal, is just to keep the current goal and continue to monitor the progress. Is there any public comments on this? Seeing none. Thank you. And let's, I think before we move on to the next agenda item, can we take a 5-minute break? Okay, let's take 5.
Before we do that,
Oh, you have to take a, do you have to take a motion?
Yes, if the board
All right.
would like to amend its strategic plan, you need board action.
We need a motion.
Make a motion to approve the strategic plan.
Moved by Greg and second by Cheryl. Any other public comment?
Just to clarify, so is the motion to adopt the
Yes.
recommendations as made by committees, all committees? Thank you.
Yes, it is. Is that okay with you, Cheryl? Yes. Okay. Okay. Second by Cheryl. Any public comment? If not, oh, come on up, Steve.
Just a clarification, please, on the motion. During the discussion from the public, there were a couple of suggestions made for slight modifications. Was the motion to approve with those modifications?
No. The modification suggested.
We have to add that later.
Later or now?
Well, we have to first agree to do it. So, I mean, you know, the motion, they were brought up, but we haven't had a chance to discuss it.
Well, my point exactly. By trying to do them all at once rather than taking them individually for each committee, you've kind of bypassed the ability to consider those modifications that were recommended by the public.
Or
So I would
perhaps they chose not to.
That's true.
I asked the question. So
No,
if
what I understood was the president said he would go back to that at the end, but I thought he meant go back to that as individual committee proposals.
So what we can do is we can avoid, I mean, we can not make a motion on all of them at this point. We can go down and make the motion all now, but individually if you want to do it that way.
We could vote on the general guidelines of the whole strategic goal, and then if you want to go individually, then we could go individually. Do you want to go?
I think what we should do is just take them one at a time.
Or do you want to take one committee at a time?
It's entirely up to the board, but the reason I asked my question, the question about the clarification was what the motion was, to adopt
I think what we should do is
the action. So it's up to the board. But as with the motion on the floor, you would be adopting exactly what the committees recommended.
All right. My motion then would be to adopt this, including the public request.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So, so do you want to modify your motion then? I think that's the appropriate method.
So,
Okay.
can I get some clarification, because there were several public comments that changed the actual wording of the goals, particularly under the enforcement committee and post and pre-discipline guidelines for 2.9. I think there needs to be more discussion, and there was discussion about breaking that down into 2.9A and 2.9B maybe. So this is just adding to the confusion if we don't go through at least this one at a time.
Would there be an issue for putting that pre in front of the post?
Well, we had.
Because we're just a discussion only.
I think that the comment that you received on that goal, I think it merges two pretty different goals. So my recommendation would be to separate them, but that's up to the board, obviously.
But we could incorporate those because those are for the discussion on the committee only at that time. You can incorporate their comments so they could include that as a discussion at the committee.
So because there's enough confusion, you might want to just retract it and go through each committee's goals.
You're still deliberating.
All right, so in your opinion, you think it's better off we could do one committee at a time?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Why don't we do that?
So
Let's
neither of the
do it.
motion and the second are okay. The
All
modified
right,
motion
let's
regarding license.
let's make the motions by committees one by one. So first is the strategic goal for the licensing committee.
I don't think we have any.
Okay, so with the licensing committee, we just had one modification on 1.9, I'm not sure. Perform annual benchmarking with national practice standards to include both scope and licensing standards.
Okay.
So
And the motion to approve that the strategic plan?
So I'm actually modifying it, it says licensing committee recommendation, so it's a slight modification of what the committee actually discussed, so
do you want to make the motion to?
Yeah, so I'm making that motion, so 1.8 would be implementation of new licensing programs proposed, and 1.9 would be, as I stated, perform annual benchmarking with national practice standards, take in consideration scope and licensing standards.
So you want to?
I would like to have a second.
With those modifications.
I second.
Okay. Second by Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yes.
All right, motion by Debbie and second by Cheryl. Any public discussions, public comments? If not, let's vote. Let's vote on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Oppose? Abstain? Okay, I move to the next committee, which is enforcement. Anything change on?
Well, no, what I want, in regards to Danny's suggestion, I don't want to change the goal. Microphone.
Get your mic on?
Okay. I certainly think what he brought up is worth discussing, and I want to bring it up in committee in the future. However, I don't want it to be added to the goals. And so I want to leave the language just as it is now.
Okay. All right. I need a motion. Moved by Alan. The second by Albert. All right. Any public comments? If not, let's call it for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Oppose? Abstain? Okay, motion carried. And next we move on to the legislation committee, right?
I don't think we have any modifications. We didn't have any modifications, so Motion to approve.
Motion by Greg,
Second.
second by Cheryl. Any public comment? If not, let's call for it. You have one? Yeah, please come up.
The compounding, or no? Are you,
No, this is legislation. This is on legislation. Yeah. Any other public comment? If not, let's call for the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Oppose? Abstain? The motion carried. And now the Public Ed Committee, Communication and Ed Committee, Ricardo?
Yeah, you have it.
You don't have any? All right, the motion? Motion by Ricardo?
Second.
Second by Greg. Any public comment? If not, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Oppose? Abstain? Motion carried. And on the Organization Development Committee, we have no change. So moved by me. I need a second. Second by Greg. Any public comment? If not, let's call for the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Oppose? Abstain? The motion carried. All right. Okay, are we good? Okay, let's take a break. Okay, are we ready to come back?
That's having fun. Board meeting's always fun, isn't it?
Ricardo? Where's Ricardo? Ricardo? Okay. All right. All right, everyone is back. Ricardo here. Ryan is here. Okay, we are back in session here. Let's move on to agenda item number 9. Discussion and consideration of proposal to modify pharmacy compounding regulations. Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 1735.1, 1735.2, 1735.6, 1751.1, and 1751.4, including review and public comments. Let me give you a little background here. At the July 2017 board meeting, the board approved proposed text to amend section 1735.1, 1735.2.6, 1751.1, 1751.4 of Title 16 CCR related to compounded drug preparations. This proposal formally amends the board's regulations regarding the establishment of compounding beyond use dates as it relates to sterile and non-sterile compound drug preparations. Additionally, this regulations allows for the use of a double filtration system and further aligns the board's regulations with the United States Pharmacopoeia and National Formulary, which is the professional industry standards used across the nation. USP contains standards developed by a committee of experts that, among other things, help ensure the quality of compounded medications. USP's general chapters for compounding establish procedures, methods, and practices that are utilized by practitioners to help ensure the quality of compounded preparations. The general chapters for compounding includes Chapter 795, which is the pharmaceutical compounding, non-sterile compounding, Chapter 797, the pharmaceutical compounding for sterile preparations, and Chapter 800, hazardous drug handling in healthcare settings. Further, the U.S. Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act designates the USP as the official compendia for drugs marketed in the United States. All drugs products within the U.S. market must conform to the standards in USP to avoid possible charges of aberrations and misbranding. As required by the Administrative Procedure Act, board staff released a proposed text for the 45 days comment period on August 3rd, 2018, which ended on September 17, 2018. At the September 26, 2018 board meeting, the board approved a modified text to address the concerns expressed by stakeholders and initiated a 15-day comment period. The 15-day comment period began on September 26, 2018 and ended on October 11, 2018. The comments received during the 15 comment period are included as an attachment. Also included are board staff prepare recommendation in response to the comments. So at this meeting, the board will have the opportunity to discuss the regulations and determine what course of action it wishes to pursue. Among its options, number 1 is to amend the regulation to address any concerns raised by stakeholders. 2 is to adopt the regulation as noticed by the board on September 26, 2018. Now, the attachment contains the following. Number 1, those approved regulation text as noticed for public comment on September 26, 2018. And 2, a copy of each comment received during the 15 public comment period for board review. 3, a compilation document of the comments received during the 15 comment period with staff recommendations. These documents summarize the comments received per reference. The board should also review the comments in section 2. So the staff recommendation is to adopt the regulation language as noticed on September 26, 2018 and delegate to the executive officer the authority to make technical or non-substantial changes as may be required by a control agency to complete the rulemaking file. Any comments from board members? Any public comment? Come on up, please.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So Tim Lopez from Community Medical Centers right down the street. Good afternoon, how are you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
Thank you.
So I wanted to see if you guys could reconsider a specific proposal that you have on 1751.4 under the facility and equipment standards for sterile compounding. And I do know that there were several comments that were sent to the board during the 15-day comment period. And it's specifically paragraph K, where it gives the range of the temperature of the room where compounding occurs. So in 1751.4, the original verbiage has a range of 68 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's being proposed to remove the range to 68 degrees and insert the word typically. So we wanted to see if there could still be a range there for the following reasons. So first and foremost, I just wanted to let you guys know that folks that, and you know this obviously, folks that are in the IV room that make the sterile compounded medications are human beings. People run different temperatures. So having it, at a steadfast 68 degrees or lower actually lowers that variability of people who actually work in the IV room. So we've had technicians expressing concern about that temperature or at 68 degrees Fahrenheit or lower being really cold. So first and foremost, the human factor. Second of all, there's also humidity regulations that we have to abide by. And in order for us to help meet those humidity regulations, one of the ways in doing that is being able to adjust the temperatures to meet the humidity regulations. You would adjust the temperature up, depending upon the humidity is, or you adjust it down. And that's really the only measure that we have of safely abiding by those humidity regulations. So by having a strict, getting rid of the range and having that strict 68 degrees really hinders those two areas specifically. So that's what I wanted to present today.
What is your recommended language?
I mean, so the recommended language is we understand if you feel that the range is too broad from 68 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and we understand that if that were to be, reduced somewhat, we could live with something like that. So we were thinking to go somewhere halfway in between. If we had 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 73 degrees Fahrenheit as a range, that's something that we could kind of compromise with. That just gives us the ability to, again, for the human factor and to meet the humidity standards is what we're shooting to do.
And you want to comment that?
You want to
comment?
So 68 to 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah.
So during the board meeting, Dr. Serpa had some really good comments specific to this, and so I think that people we're really focused on the range, and really what we're trying to do is align with USP that says typically, but the underlying principle is that it needs to be comfortable for the person that is completing the compounding. And so the staff recommended that we reject it, and we were really actually deferring a lot to the board's comments when it was previously discussed. And so the recommendation is to reject it. Typically does not mean that it has to be 68 or below. And really what it is about is looking at the practice, the individual, and are they compounding in an environment that's comfortable so that they're not sweating and perspiring and posing a risk to the public by compromising the product. So the staff recommendation is to reject.
So if the intent is to, if the intent of inserting the word typically is to not set a dead fast temperature, then adding a range would only clarify and enhance what you're trying to do by inserting the word typically.
So if
we don't see any harm in being reasonable and having that small range there for us to work with. And I think it would help clarify, because I understand what you're trying to do by inserting that word typically, but I think it would provide more clarification if you continue to have that word in addition to the range that we're looking for. It's a minor.
So this is Maria Serpa, and we had a long discussion at the last board meeting about this with many stakeholders. And I think that the intent is to keep the two sections that talk about temperature range consistent with USP. That's first. That's the first intent, is that we don't want different ranges, different numbers than USP has. The second part was about individual employee comfort. And that's a different number that was in conflict with USP standards for medication storage. So the original language was changed at the last meeting because in order to meet the previous language means that you can no longer store drugs in the IV room at all. So then we were balanced with, well, what's the best way to allow medication storage needs and regulations, room temperature needs and regulations, and employee comfort needs and regulations. Balancing those three are in different sections of the regulations. So we're focusing on this one because this one is all about the employee, but there are other sections of regulation that speak to medication storage.
And I'm familiar with those, Title 22, exactly. So by keeping that range 68 to 73, it wouldn't conflict with Title 22 standards.
It's not just in Title 22, it's other Board of Pharmacy regulation section and in USP. So the idea was to not conflict, to allow medications to continue to be stored in the IV room. So the group at the last board meeting worked with how we could be specific but yet have a gray area. And that's where the conflict was, how do you can't do both. And so that's where the word typically was included. So then it becomes a Today, it may be a few degrees different, but it's not something that's going to be required every day to be at that specific range. So that's the intent. Now, if you have any suggestions about how to word it so that we could accomplish all those 3 goals?
Yeah, so I think, so if I understand correctly, if inspector were to walk in with these proposed regulations, if they found that the temperature was 72 degrees Fahrenheit, the intent of the language is we would point out at that moment with them that there's the word typically in there, so that allows for some fluctuation and some flexibility, and they would most likely could potentially, if everything else was of course in line, the 72 degrees Fahrenheit would be acceptable.
I think, this is Laura. So I would answer that question, yes, if the compounding personnel were comfortable. The key would be that I would imagine that the inspector would be looking to see if the personnel that were in the room were sweating.
Okay. But I guess the issue that we have is over time, as things get read and interpreted, I think it loses its, we're having this discussion here that if it's 72 degrees and the employee's comfortable, that might be okay, but I'm just afraid that over time and over years, as someone reads it, they're going to say, nope, it says 68. And I think by having that small range is basically stating that what we've all discussed right now, that range of 68 to 73 could potentially be acceptable based upon the current language. So
Now,
it would just help kind of memorialize the discussion we're having, I think.
okay, so I'll pre-qualify my comment by saying not a compounding pharmacist, okay? But as I recall, and you can correct me because I remember you were there, that one of the other concerns of having the range is that also puts a low and a high on it. And I remember one of the stakeholders coming up and saying, you know, we work in, I might have been Sacramento because that's where we work, and sometimes the air conditioning goes out. And so possibly the room could get more than 75. And if I have this range, now I am black and white out of compliance.
But
this individual actually was one of the people who was kind of promoting and thought this was a good idea to use typically and not to have a range that's black and white, that actually provided some flexibility and reasonableness to an inspector coming in and saying, you know, you're not in the box, so we're creating a situation where there's not a box.
So we like the word typically for that exact reason, and we agree with that. We thought that it would just help provide a little bit more flexibility by having that in addition to a small range.
So I think when we were talking, if you had typically and the range, then the range kind of was the guidance. And so it's kind of like you can't have your cake and eat it too, like your mama used to always say. So it's, you know, if it's typically in a range, then the range was the high and the low and kind of set in stone. By having typically and only the one temperature, then it actually provided you with more flexibility and situation, you know, stuff happens. And this allows for stuff to happen and employee comfort.
So what it actually says...
Not a compounding, I'm just reiterating what I recall.
So we feel comfortable that if a Board of Pharmacy inspector came, they would have that same interpretation and not look for a dead set 68 degrees Fahrenheit is what we're saying?
That's what we're saying.
Well, the only thing is what it says is 68 or cooler. So by saying that, isn't that kind of putting a low range on it?
But it also says, but it also says typically.
Yeah, so what we're trying to combat is, you know, here in the area and in California in general, we'll go, especially in this area, we'll go long periods of time without rain, I'm sorry. So with that, that really has a large impact on the humidity. And that humidity starts to come down, and one of the ways that can help to combat that is by increasing the temperature slightly by doing so. So we're not really against 68 or cooler. It's just the dead set number at 68. And if the interpretation is that we couldn't go higher, that would be a big issue for us. But okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
And I also want to kind of emphasize that the board directs what the inspectors should be doing. And I think that that is one of the focuses of the enforcement committee. That, you know, we don't want inspectors out there doing, you know, random radical things. They should be following the policy that's being set by the board, and I think our board staff works very hard to try to get that out there. But I think that's one of the things that the enforcement committee is working on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Victor, could I just add one thing?
Yeah.
As part of the rulemaking process in general, when we are receiving comments and then the board is considering, you are making your policy statement, and that is memorialized in the rulemaking as part of the final statement of reasons. So even the policy discussion that you're having here is memorialized and can be relied upon when looking at how to interpret any kind of a regulation. It's just a general procedural question that I just wanted to highlight, just in case that helps comfort some people.
Okay. Thank you, Anne, for the clarification.
Robert Stein from KGI School of Pharmacy. I just want to point out that the USP storage standards for controlled room temperature, the low end of that range is 68. So by specifying a temperature of 68 or lower, you are actually violating USP standards.
Steve Gray, pharmacist. I'm a former compounding pharmacist and also was responsible for what we now call today a 503B. We had an FDA-registered centralized compounding facility that was doing everything you'd have to do for GMP and for all of that. What we discovered was what has been pointed out here, that employee comfort is absolutely essential to maintaining employee discipline for sterile compounding procedures. And so it is completely appropriate for that to be the focus. I think focusing on storage requirements on USP, you have to keep in mind that typically in an IV room, you don't have a lot of storage. I mean, you have immediate use storage, but you don't have a lot of storage, or you shouldn't have. If you really look at USP, and storage conditions now are like in 4 different parts of USP, it's really complicated. And in fact, some of the people on the board may remember that a few years ago, the board was going to change its regulation that referred to USP 1995. And then somebody asked, have you read the current version? And they decided not to do it. But my point is that the current USP standards for storage actually have a much broader range than was just described, because they talk about several different types of room temperatures and others, and they also say, or whatever the manufacturer has in their package insert. And so just to think that, well, all we have to do is keep things at room temperature is really not accurate either if you're really talking about storage. You really have to be much more complicated than that. The problem I see with going up to something like 75 or 73 is we have a constant battle in facilities with engineers. And engineers will look at that and we'll go in there and they say, well, show me the regulation. And they'll say, hey, see, it says 75 or 73. You know, we're not going to do anything. And the reality is, you know, there are things we could do, and we proved it because when under FDA rules, you did what you had to do. And it may be more expensive equipment, it may be better insulation, it may be backup generators so you don't lose power when it's 105 degrees and there's a blackout. But employee comfort is absolutely essential to maintaining employee discipline on sterile compounding procedures, and employee discipline on procedures is the critical factor to maintaining safety of sterile compounding products, more than the facility, more than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anybody else? Please come up.
Hi, Christine Burskell with Dynalabs. I'm just going to read the USB Chapter 797, a couple sentences.
Yay!
Sterile compounding areas must provide a comfortable and well-lighted working environment which typically includes the temperature of 20 degrees Celsius or cooler, to maintain comfortable conditions for compounding personnel to perform flawlessly when attired in the required aseptic compounding garb. Why don't we just do that?
That's what we're doing.
That's what we're trying to do. Okay. All right, any other public comments? Seeing none, so I need a motion to adopt the staff recommendation.
So moved.
Moved by Greg,
I'll second.
second by Debbie. Any other public comments? If not, let's call for the vote. All those in favor? Do you need us to read, Laura, do you need to read the staff recommendation?
No, as long as everybody understands it's the staff recommendation from the agenda item, so it's
Okay.
the authority that authorizes the
Okay.
PO to make the non-citizen.
All right, motion by Greg, second by Debbie. All those in favor, please raise your hand. We got Albert here. Oppose, abstain, and motion carried. Thank you, everyone. All right, let's move on to the Enforcement and Compounding Committee meetings. All right, Chairperson, Alan.
All right. This is the first topic out of 10 in the chair report. First item is presentation.
Microphone.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Thank God I'm here today. I'm contributing so much to this.
We need more. Feel free to interject. Okay. Topic 1, presentation of boards enforcement program. And
you may want to pull a little closer because I don't think it's coming across.
Big-
You may want to pull the mic a little closer.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't think we can hear that.
Why, thank you. I'm glad you want to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
there.
I'm helping Josh out.
You know.
It takes two of us to do this.
Thank you. Okay, Ann Sodergrum provided an overview of the board enforcement program that included general workload and staffing information. This is in attachment 1. The committee was informed that board staff are collecting information specific to drug loss reports and whether law enforcement agencies are notified by the pharmacy. Once the data set is obtained by the board, the board would like opportunity to review and determine whether it's normal practice to notify law enforcement at the time they determine employee pilferage. The data analysis would provide on how integrated that practice is and whether policy should be reconsidered. Additionally, script articles could be published to recommend law enforcement notification. As part of the discussion, clarification was sought on what information is reported to the National Practitioner Data Bank. The board staff stated that the disciplinary information is required to be reported by federal law. Subsequently, once there's a change in the status of a license, for example, once a license has been completed probation, a follow-up report is submitted to NPDB to inform them of the completed probation. Second topic, presentation of enforcement trends. Jenny presented information on the compounding enforcement trends that included aggregate data on the outcomes of sterile and non-sterile pharmacy inspections conducted 2017 and 18, as well as the top violations found in each setting. And followed up with an information on drug loss enforcement trends. This data was a summary from the review of drug loss reports over the 3 fiscal years. The data revealed that the number of loss reports had increased 153%. Further, the total number of dosage units also increased, but at a smaller rate, 16%. These are in attachment 2. As part of the discussion on drug losses, it was suggested that pharmacies may want to consider transitioning to real-time inventory for controlled drugs to reduce stock on hand. Such a change could reduce the number of robberies and night break-ins. Typically, robberies occur and then reoccur after the pharmacy has had time to restock. Further, the committee noted that inventory reconciliation regulations take effect. It is expected the losses due to employee pilferage will also be reduced as identification of losses should happen more quickly. Item 3, presentation
I have a question. Can I interrupt you, or? do you-
I love that. I always look forward to comments from you there.
So from the leading committee to number 2.
Pardon?
So I don't understand this correlation between if a pharmacy has real-time inventory, that it would reduce the stock on hand and thus reduce the number of robberies?
Well, no, it would reduce the amount of drug taken, because, you know, if you have a real-time inventory, your actual inventory number of tablets is going to be smaller. And if you have, you know, 20 bottles of 500 on the shelf, I can make a big haul. So that's the thought behind that, you know. And so that's my thrust there.
Okay, so we just you guys just kind of discussed it, but no, I mean, in the prior item about reporting losses to law enforcement, you just kind of discussed it, but really you didn't feel like it was.
Well, we took no action on it, and the reason that we took no action on it, and it's probably going to be discussed more. There are some members of the board that felt that every robbery should be reported to police. And then we had heard discussion from the public and from the staff that these robberies, which are relatively small in the face of the opioid crisis, aren't given high priority and are just kind of shuffled into an abyss that never gets paid attention to. And so it might, there's no sense in having a regulation to move forward with that. It's not going to be effective. I mean, more complex regulation for no effect just doesn't make sense. I mean, we can recommend, we think that it should be reported, but there's no concrete way that this is going to be paid attention to, even if we do regulate it. And so that was the thought behind it, that if we mandated that it be reported to the police, it's just a futile step. And so that was the thought behind it, you know, because if I have 25, 100, 150, 200 hydrocodone tablets, or 1,000, 2,000, it's not going to be a significant thing. Maybe it'll help with insurance loss, or maybe the fact that we're reporting it to say we're following up on it. But to mandate it seemed, which was part of the discussion, it kind of seemed like a futile effort.
Okay, I appreciate the additional information.
On to number 3? Okay, good.
Please.
Okay, pay close attention. Okay. Presentation and discussion of the efforts to reduce investigation times and case resolutions. At the June 7th, 2018 Enforcement Committee, the committee discussed the average time for case investigations. The staff continues to work to the goal of decreasing the number of aging case investigations. One of the committee's strategic goals is to implement this process to shorten cycle times, which we mentioned previously. Chiefs of Enforcement, Julia Ansel and Tom Lennox, provided a presentation on the board's current pending investigations, including the average number of days identified by benchmarks as of August 1. The committee was informed that DCA's target for intake, which is defined as the number of days from receipt of complaint to the date of complaint, that is either closed or assigned, is 20 days. The board's average time was 27 days. For the month of July, it had improved to 19 days. The committee was informed that DCA's target for case investigations, not transmitted to the office of the AG, is 210 days, which includes both intake and investigation. The Board of Pharmacy average days for cases under investigation in the field during the 2017-18 year was 235 days. For the month of July, it had improved to 165 days. The public comment included a recommendation that the board establish a subcommittee whose responsibility would be to evaluate each case before referral to the Office of Attorney General. It was suggested that such committee could initiate a peer review by independent expert and provide board member input during the AG referral consideration process. This is something that Danny was referring to a certain extent. The number 4, discuss.
Sorry. So, do we know what, this is impressive that the staff, brought it down to 19 days, 165 days. Was that just a refocus of efforts in the month of July? Is this something we can expect being the standard going forward?
The goal is to always do cases as quickly as possible, but staff is working very hard. We're pretty much fully staffed right at the moment. We've got 2 chiefs of enforcement, which we haven't had before, so it allows a more refined process. And we're reporting, and there's nothing like reporting figures publicly to get you to pay attention to what the bottom line is. So, yeah, I think the 19 days is reasonable for that particular component. The real determinant, though, is case closure time, which is what this board has to continue to watch and evaluate against, because that's really where a lot can go haywire.
Well, I mean, it also seems like the investigation that you brought, from 235 days down to 165. I mean, that's good, but, and I know it just takes time to get out in the field and do the homework, but I just want to make sure we weren't robbing Peter to pay Paul. So this looks good, and then, another metric's going to go whoop, way up.
And part of that's the balancing, and maybe some months you focus more on getting your cases closed, and the next months you should go out and do routine inspections instead, which is going to kind of offset perhaps the other, if you're doing 30 or 40 inspections during a month as opposed to doing investigations. But that's part of the balancing act. But we have a lot of metrics that we use to measure, and by reporting them publicly, it gives the board an opportunity to really voice in on where they want to see the time spent, and where they think maybe the staff can pull back. But overall, our times for closures look better than a lot of agencies because it's focused. We focus on it. We always have focused on it. It's just we're particularly pronounced right at the moment.
Thank you.
All right.
And I need to commend staff for their work in this area, because we have a lot of people working really hard in order to meet these deadlines. We have a supervising inspector that's going to get to go home and work tonight because she's sitting here today.
No, that's absolutely true. When you look at the figures, it is impressive, and especially since I first came on the board. We got a lot of complaints about this. The complaints have fallen tremendously. Thank you. Her comment was, or else I'm going deaf because of it. Okay, the discussion and consideration of the board's citation and fine program. This is one of the goals that we adopted, and we had a presentation by Julie and Tom that provided a snapshot of data from the board issued citations for the month of July. It was 279 violations with an average fine of $608 per violation, for a total of $169,500 in fines assessed in the month of July. They also reviewed the top violations for the month. The citations examples were provided to the committee, included various violations including medication errors, failure to provide documentation substantiating continuing drug education completion, unprofessional conduct, pharmacy security and drug losses, duty to review drug therapy and compounding policies and procedure requirements. The board staff has been reviewing citations for opportunities where abatements might be offered. Specifically, some citations, there may be instances where licensees may have the option to take continuing education in a specific area of pharmacy law or education, and upon proof of completion, the fine associated with the citation could be reduced or eliminated, depending on the circumstances. Public discussion included a request for clarification on what constitutes unlicensed practice and who determines the amount of citations and fines within the board. Ms. Harold provided examples of unlicensed practice and emphasized that in regard to unlicensed activity, the primary goal is to obtain compliance. The board has the ability to issue cease and desist orders when unlicensed activities do not stop. In addition, part of the public discussion, the board was asked who approves the citations and fines. Mr. Lennox confirmed that the chiefs of enforcement review and approve the citations and fines issued as a result of inspections and field investigations. This topic is going to be focused on over the next year, and there will be there will be continued reporting on it. I think the entire board is interested in this. Number 5, discussion and consideration of convening administrative case hearings before board members. During the 2018 June committee meeting, board members were informed that pharmacy boards in other states have opted for administrative case hearings to be heard with board members. The board explained that although law allows for 2 different adjudication processes, the board's administrative case hearings are currently only heard before an administrative law judge. Alternative, at the discretion of the agency, that is also allowed that administrative case hearings may be heard by the agency itself with an ALJ presiding over the proceeding. This is similar to the method used by the board to consider petitions for modification of penalties. The board took into consideration in FY 17-18 42 decisions that were received from ALJs. This is equated to 62 days of hearing. Although the majority of cases heard before an ALJ are 1 day, the case complexity increases, as so does the number of hearing days, which are typically consecutive. The board members discussed areas of particular concern. No action was taken, and however, this will be a discussion of upcoming enforcement committee agendas. Presentation on the board's inventory reconciliation process and review of frequently asked questions. On April 1, 2018, the new board regulation took effect. Board believes that this regulation will aid pharmacies and clinics in preventing the losses of controlled drugs and identifying those losses early. Since the adoption of the regulation, board inspectors have received numerous questions from licensees regarding the new reconciliation regulation. In response, the board is focused on education to promote an understanding of the regulation. During this transition, inspectors will focus on the pharmacy or clinic's good faith efforts to comply with the regulation. During the meeting, Board Supervising Inspector Michael Ignacio and Chief of Enforcement Tom Lennox provided general information on the inventory reconciliation process and the FAQs. These were developed by board staff and DCA Council. First FAQs are available on the board's website and were established in the July 18 edition of, were published in the July 18 edition of the script. Second group of FAQs are being developed and include items identified during the interactions between inspectors and licensees. The committee was advised that the presentation on the reconciliation regulation has also been incorporated into the board's quarterly pharmacy, drug abuse, and diversion training. It was presented to over 200 pharmacists in the July 28 event. The next event is Soberhorn. Ms. Harold informed the board that the increased number of drug losses reported, it is expected that the quantities reported would be progressively smaller. In addition, the public is encouraged to submit questions to the board for inclusion in future FAQ sheets. There is a copy of the first FAQ sheet in attachment 5. 7. Discussion and consideration of remodel inspections of sterile compounding pharmacies and the possible authority to assess a fee for such inspections. Background. A sterile compounding license shall not be issued or renewed until the location has been inspected by the board and found to be in compliance. A fee is assessed for the issuance or the renewal of a sterile compounding license. Under current law, the board does not charge a fee for inspection resulting from the remodel of a sterile compounding pharmacy. Since the beginning of fiscal year 2015, the board has conducted approximately 60 sterile compounding remodel inspections. The inspections are conducted by the board after a facility has completed the remodel of their location. There is no requirement in the law to conduct these remodel inspections, but it is a safety issue that must nonetheless be done. Board staff believes that not conducting these remodel inspections could pose a patient safety risk. Remodel inspections are triggered by unforeseen damage, planned upgrades, or expansion. The scope of a remodel ranges from simple projects to a full remodel. All sterile compounding inspections have the same requirements to ensure full compliance with the regulations adopted. When notified in a pending remodel to a sterile compounding facility, the board attempts to conduct an inspection within 6 to 8 weeks from the date of notification. Most remodel inspections request are planned projects the facility is aware of months in advance. Travel costs and inspector time for the remodel inspections are currently being absorbed by the board. During the discussion and action, Stan Weiser of the licensing committee requested clarification on what constitutes a remodel and whether the board needs to redefine a remodel. So consequently, after further discussion, it was recommended that this issue be discussed and considered by the licensing committee instead. So as a recommended motion here from our committee, we'd like to refer this to the licensing committee for further consideration. So, do we need to get a second on that? Or
I don't think you need it if it's covered.
Oh, all right, great. So, all those, any discussion out there? Any board discussion? All those in favor? That it be moved to the licensing committee? Okay, refer the issue to the license committee for further consideration. And this is defining what a remodel is and charging for a remodel.
Whether it should be
Or rather, there should be a charge. Right? So, all those in favor? Against? Abstain. Okay. Number 8, update on the University of California, San Diego experimental program regarding access to medications from an automated drug delivery system pursuant to California Code Title 16, Section 1706.5. At the July 17 board meeting, the board heard and discussed results of the UCSD experimental study involving the use of ADDS technology to dispense new and refill medications to outpatients in an area non-adjacent to the pharmacy counter. The study involves a waiver of California Code of Regulations 1713, in which allows first-time fills to be dispensed via an ADDS machine. This machine is not adjacent to the pharmacy, but is installed in a hospital location. During the July board meeting, the board heard the final report of the study and supported a request from UCSD to extend the study for 1 more year to provide additional data. Ultimately, the board voted to expand and extend the study. During the meeting, the board also directed UCSD to provide study updates to the enforcement committee every 6 months. Let's see here. Committee discussion and action. Ms. Harold informed the committee that the next presentation is scheduled for March 2019. The committee was reminded that the board would request a data comparison of people who received truly new prescriptions versus those that were just getting refills. Due to the reported difficulty in collecting data, Ms. Harold asked the committee if they still wanted the researchers to continue this collection. The committee opted to discontinue the collection of this data category. So, another motion here from the board, from the committee, is to direct UCSD to discontinue the collection of truly new prescription data. Any discussion out there? Any discussion with the board? All those in favor? Against? Abstain. Okay, passed. Item number 9, discussion and consideration of federal law and state law regarding cannabidiol. Is that how you pronounce it, Josh?
Cannabidiol.
Oh, okay. Not just okay.
That's how I pronounce it.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought we might have a vote. We'll have a vote on that here. Okay. The supervising Deputy Attorney General, Josh Room, authored an opinion on the legal status of products containing CBD. In light of the FDA approval of Epidiolex and AB 710, which was enacted in mid-2018. Attachment 6 is the opinion, and the discussion was that Josh clarified the opinion regards only the prescribing of products containing CBD, not from the selling of products. He informed the committee that current federal and state law has not changed in status for the purpose of prescribing or for dispensing. In addition, the DEA has taken no action to reschedule CBD, and there's no indication on their website that they will.
Can I interrupt for just a
second?
second? Since that event, the DEA did take action to reschedule Epidiolex and other like FDA-approved CBD drugs. So I provided an updated opinion that has been pushed out to the board's subscriber alert.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know that we need to talk about the whole opinion at this point, but I just wanted to let you know factually that there has been an update because there was a rescheduling of this particular chemical combination of CBD under a certain threshold of THC that is what Epidiolex is. That was approved by the FDA for limited uses and was rescheduled by the DEA from Schedule 1 to Schedule 5, allowing that particular drug, at this point that's the only drug, to be prescribed and dispensed. But the DEA rescheduling is, broad enough that if any other drug, generic or otherwise, were approved that also met those criteria, it could also be prescribed or dispensed.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you, Josh.
Sure.
I'm glad you're here.
I would like to thank Josh. He spent a lot of time wading through some relatively arcane law at the federal and state level in order to get to that. So we've been asked questions when we thought it was important that we get the information out, so we have.
I would like to emphasize the point that you said, Alan, which is this is really, there's sort of two siloed tracks. This is the sort of DEA registrant part of the world, prescribing, dispensing, furnishing, that relates to CBD drugs. There's the whole other realm, which is what happens in marijuana, what used to be called dispensaries and now called retailers, where CBD containing products may be lawfully sold or purchased in a retail environment, but that's, as my footnote says in both letters, I'm not dealing with that because that's wholly separate from this issue of what can be done by a DEA registrant.
Again, thank you, John. All right, well, we can see this is going to be part of an ongoing discussion that will be updated as we speak, I guess. Okay. Number 10, discussion and consideration of the board enforcement statistics.
Wait, before that, I have a question. So, Josh, do we have an update on the opinion about this CBD oil that people are asking if they have a percentage of less than 0.1%?
We have an update on the particular, yes, we have an update that was dated October 12th. This is an updated letter, which anyone can see. It's on the board website, or you can get a copy, presumably. So that particular drug, Epidiolex, or however you say it, can be lawfully prescribed and dispensed at this point in California and federally. That does not pertain to any other drug that may contain the same percentage of CBD and the same low percentage of THC unless that drug has also been approved by the FDA. Because the rescheduling by the DEA was specifically contingent on FDA approval, as was California law, which allows for lawful prescribing and dispensing of that product. So there are two conditions precedent to prescribing or dispensing any of these drugs. One, it has to have been approved by the DEA, and two, it has to have been rescheduled by the federal government. So both of those have happened only with regard to Epidiolex.
Well, my question is like the CBD oil, which is a product not approved by, licensed by DEA, not classified as what schedule, but they're being sold at some of the dispensary outside. So would a pharmacy carrying those products with the same problem like you mentioned at the last meeting that we have a problem with DEA?
Right. I mean, obviously, I don't speak for the DEA or for the for the state controlled substance enforcement mechanisms, but I will say that none of those products have been rescheduled. So all of those products would still be Schedule 1 under both federal and California law, and all of the consequences of selling those would come along with them. At the federal level, those consequences could, theoretically apply even to marijuana retailers, because there's nothing that has changed the status of those materials under federal law. So at any moment, the DEA could theoretically do raids on marijuana retailers that are licensed by the state of California, they have, as of yet, shown no inclination to do that. But none of that makes it any more lawful for a pharmacy or any other DEA registrant to be involved in the sale of what is still a Schedule I substance under both state and federal law.
Okay, thank you.
Can you take public comment on that?
Yeah.
First of all, Josh, I think you did a good job with some very conflicting, you really weighed in that nicely. The dilemma is, there's a lot of evidence that CBD is effective in treating people. My wife, as a pharmacist, is trying to get the evidence, but there's scant evidence because the federal government has it as Schedule I. And these things are being sold in markets, on street fairs, etc. And a pharmacist would be much more likely to provide good information to a patient about it than a person in the street. So my question is, and you probably won't be able to answer this question, I'm going to put it out there anyway, is what if a board inspector walks into a pharmacy and sees CBD oil being dispensed by a pharmacist that's licensed under a retail pharmacy license in California? Are they going to take action against that pharmacist because they're dispensing a Schedule I narcotic which can't be dispensed legally in the United States except under certain limited conditions?
Well, you're right. I can't. It's not even that I'm unwilling to answer the question. I can't answer that question because that's really a board policy determination or an enforcement policy determination. I prosecute the cases after the fact. The only thing I can tell the board is that that activity is technically not lawful under either state or federal law. So if the board chooses to set a policy one way or the other, then that would be up to the board to do so. Typically, the board doesn't set policies that allow licensees to violate the law, but they could say that this is not an enforcement priority or something like that if they wanted to. But that's...
the DEA has, I have no knowledge, and maybe someone else does, of the DEA busting a street fair vendor or anybody for CBD. I know the DA's busted people for THC, but not for CBD. That has less than a certain amount of THC in it. And I have no knowledge of the board of pharmacy inspectors doing that. But what's happening here is these vendors, at least in a pharmacy, there's a possibility to ensure that what the contents are of the product, and you can't ensure the contents of the product in these other locations, where in pharmacies they may be. So I think what's happening now is, again, we want to protect the public, obviously that's what the board's trying to do. But by not allowing the public to have access to something that might be helping people might be a detriment. And again, it would require state, maybe a federal law to be changed so that could occur. But I just kind of want to get a sense of, because I think your memo left that unanswered. It just said the federal law could prosecute, and it didn't say anything about what the state was going to do or what the board was going to do. So any thoughts about...
Right, I'm only providing the legal landscape. It's
I understand.
Not my role to outline policy in that way.
I think Victor was kind of touching upon this because I'm sure he's experiencing this in his practice setting or has seen this in the state of California.
Well, exactly, that their products, they are being sold at all the other places, and the pharmacists as a drug information center, when we're not allowed to do so, it's kind of this
Doesn't make
dilemma,
sense,
right?
yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me, that's all. Comment? Yeah, public comment? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, you can come down one at a time.
Well,
come on down, public.
I was going to say that you're absolutely right, Victor. No one is allowed to sell CBD oil. It's in Schedule I. Now, whether it should, I personally don't think it should be in Schedule I. The common extraction processes for CBD from hemp, industrial hemp, contain so much less THC than is allowed under the law for CBD oil. That's just my opinion.
I should make a clarifying point at this point, and I don't want to wade too far into the weeds of this topic. But my understanding, and I'm not an expert in this area, but my understanding is that the state agencies that license these retail facilities and the growers that has made a determination that CBD oil has to be derived from the cannabis plant, and CBD oil that's derived from industrial hemp is not subject to sale.
Really?
Yes.
That's my understanding of how it works.
Yeah, so, hi guys, I'm John Wright. I'm with Ananda Professional. Ananda Professional is a specifically designed line of hemp-derived, what we would call full-spectrum extract products. We designed this line specifically to serve the independent pharmacy. We're headquartered in Kentucky. We do have a sales and marketing office in California as well. Right now we're in probably about 2,200 independent pharmacies throughout the country. And what we're doing is relying on a very important piece of legislation that was passed at the federal level in 2014. Section 7606 of the 2014 Farm Bill created a specific exemption for state departments of agriculture to license farmers to grow hemp. Now, since hemp is derived as cannabis, that contains only trace amounts of THC, right? So ag departments can license farmers to grow hemp and extract all parts of the plant, including the floral extracts. Now, the floral extract is where the CBD is, contained, but there's also other kinds of vital properties that come out of that extract, right? So CBD is really just one kind of molecule that can be found in the hemp plant. That's kind of aside from the point. Furthermore, beyond Section 7606, the federal government also put a rider into the corresponding 2016 omnibus that specifically defunded the DEA or any other federal agency from enforcing prosecution against corresponding and compliant hemp products. So what we're doing is cultivating hemp in the state of Kentucky legally. We're overseen by the State Department of Agriculture. They come in, they test our crops, they do all kinds of other inspections on a routine basis. Once they verify that our crops contain less than 0.3% THC, we extract, we formulate, we bottle, and we distribute these products. Again, we have the line Ananda Professional that's in 2,200 pharmacies, community pharmacies right now. We also sell on a white label basis. We sell a few other brands. We have never had any issue. CBD has never been scheduled under the CSA. Marijuana has, and its related resins. But that said, again, there is a federal exemption that exists to allow hemp products to be distributed in all 50 states.
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Yes, please.
I think you agreed with what I said about how California is enforcing the distinction between CBD derived from the entire cannabis plant versus CBD that's derived from the separately derived industrial hemp. Is that your understanding of how it's working?
I do agree wholeheartedly with that statement. So right now in California, obviously there's the paradigm of the medical marijuana dispensary or retailer, as we now call it. They have to operate under a different regulatory scheme, whereas a hemp-derived extract product, and bear in mind, again, we don't label or call our product CBD. We call it a hemp extract or a full-spectrum extract.
What's the difference, though, in reality?
The difference is, so Epidiolex, for example, is a purified form of CBD. They run it through a bunch of different purification processes and isolate that single molecule. We're extracting, the properties from the plant and basically putting it in the bottles, right? So it exists in a much broader spectrum, a much more natural state.
But does it have the same effect? Or?
Actually, we believe, and this is a whole other conversation, has a better effect. It's actually more potent, it works better than isolating. Anytime you isolate a single molecule versus, present something in its natural state. But this is the path we believe inevitably that will go the dietary supplement route, where, isolating and purifying single compounds, filing INDs and studying them against specific indications is obviously drug development. And there's other examples where things like this can live in sort of a, multiple vector, to market. Omega fish oil, for example, is an example, like Lovatsa, right, is a scheduled drug, but I could still go buy fish oil at the store.
No, it's not scheduled, it's a dangerous, it's a prescription drug.
Pardon me, I meant to say prescription.
So your products are being sold legally in the state of Kentucky?
Our products are sold in almost all 50 states.
50 states?
Yes.
I guess my question was, are you running into obstacles because your CBD or other, general, not CBD, but floral extract products are derived from industrial hemp? Are you not being allowed to sell those in the retailers or what
No,
needs to be called?
industrial hemp is what allows us.
Okay.
So, you know,
I know under federal law, I'm saying that my understanding is the California Department of Public Health has said that CBD derived from industrial hemp is not permitted for sale.
So what they did was put out a memo, right? And they said that it's under their opinion that it's not a registered dietary supplement and shouldn't be present in food products. And the quick answer to that is no, we have seen no enforcement behind that, and I haven't heard. You can still go into, I'm in Fresno right now, pardon me, I don't know the local grocery store, but in Orange County, you go to all 8 Mothers Markets, for example, and buy not only our product, but other brands. So since that memo came out in July, I have not seen any enforcement.
What about in pharmacies, you sell it, right?
In California? Only a few. Most of our pharmacy footprint, admittedly, is in the Midwest and on the East Coast. And again, we've had no issue there.
Will they be afraid to sell? I mean, if we hear the opinion from Josh in California, that's
Well,
what I wonder why.
That's why they sent me here.
Why is it possible that all the other states can do that and we can't do it? I mean, the DA haven't given you guys a trouble in all the other states.
Well, and what we found is that this is vital, you know, at the community pharmacy level.
Scratching my head here, that's all.
This is why we're bringing it up.
That's what we're discussing. Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, I guess I'll just end my comment saying, you know, again, this has worked out very well for community pharmacists. They're finding ways to bring margin to their business, bring new, exciting products that diversify their entire business model. You know, they can find ways that it helps with their customer base. And obviously, I guess the last point of clarification, they're not dispensing it behind the counter. This is a other side of the counter item, you know, next to the vitamin C. So it's important, and thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Before you
Hey,
go,
Josh.
Questions?
how do you pronounce it? Cannabidiol or?
Cannabidiol.
Listen to that.
It's all good.
You asked how I pronounce it.
Don't ask the lawyer how to pronounce it.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Josh, question for you. Doesn't federal law trump state law?
I mean, you know, yes.
So-
That's
so-
why I have said that in theory, the DEA could take action against these state retailers. So.
No, but they've approved it.
No, the federal law.
Right, but that's a very different track. That's a Department of Agriculture. That's a totally different track.
You're going with the fact that they approved it, right?
Correct. Since the federal government has approved the use of the extract from hemp, every California pharmacy should be able to, you know.
I'm not as familiar. I mean, you can ask him. I'm not as familiar with the provisions that he cited from the Farm Bill. My assumption is that pertains to the growth of those products. I don't know what it says about distribution or sales, so I'd have to review that to be
Can you find
more
out?
clear. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we want, therefore Josh to do some of the work. All right, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Sonia Logman with Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. We oversee the Department of Consumer Affairs along with 10 other state departments in California. And I just wanted to remind the board that your sister agency, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, is under your family umbrella of the Department of Consumer Affairs. So perhaps Council Room might be able to work with our Chief Counsel at Department of Consumer Affairs and provide a briefing to the board.
We love it.
Yeah,
We need that information.
Of course. I think it sounds like we've got a few different pieces swirling around, sort of the purview of the pharmacy board, the purview of the commercial cannabis licensing structure between our 3 lead agencies, the Bureau as well as Department of Public Health and Food and Ag, and then the Industrial Hemp Board, which is under the purview of the Department of Food and Agriculture, which is meeting actually on, I believe, October 30th to take up a few of these items, and we'll eventually
take up, I think, how hemp is distributed. And as clarification, hemp-derived products are not able to be sold as our regulations are currently written in a retail premises that is licensed by the Bureau of Cannabis Control.
Thank you so much.
Right, and that's what I should just mention that both versions of my opinions were vetted through various layers, including through legal counsel for the Bureau of Cannabis Control.
Hi, Robert Stein, KGI School of Pharmacy. This actually brings up a really good question in terms of pharmacists being able to advise patients on the use of cannabinoids, including both THC and cannabidiol. But currently in the curriculum of pharmacy schools, it's very, very limited in terms of any information that's given. So I would be a little bit concerned about, having pharmacists advising patients unless they actually have had some, training or education on that topic. Also want to point out that in Connecticut and I believe New York, the only person that can actually legally dispense medical cannabis is a pharmacist, not in a pharmacy, in a special licensed dispensary. So that keeps the separation of the federal license and DEA out of that particular state operation. There's also a Jeff Sessions memo, though, that kind of suggests that the federal government, now each state's attorney that is Attorney General has the ability to make a discretionary call as to whether or not to prosecute. So we're not out of the woods at all.
Well, that memo might not be relevant after November 6th.
Yeah, correct.
Will still be. His policy may live on, though.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to add Rafi Simonian again, former board member, pharmacist, and happy to be in Fresno. So the two other things I want to mention that the board should consider, particularly with the opioid crisis, my wife and I had a meeting with our pain specialist at UCSD, who's a very legitimate guy, he's published a lot. They're getting a lot of people off opioids by using a combination of THC and CBD, and it's a hell of a lot safer than the opioids. And again, this is an avenue that's not, a pharmacist can't intervene on because of what we said. Also, there's a lot of misunderstanding about the bioavailability of these products. Has to be put under the tongue and kept in the mouth for a while to be absorbed. If you swallow it, it gets inactivated by the gut. If you put it on the skin, it doesn't get absorbed. And a lot of people think, they say here's CBD oil, they rub it on their skin. It's not working. Might smell good or something, but it's not working. So really, this is why I think, and again, it's a very challenging situation because of the conflict with the federal state laws, or with the federal law in particular. But if there's something we can do to move the meter so that a pharmacist can help patients with some of these really nice benefits, I think it would be good for the board to tackle that in some way beyond what the good work Josh has already done. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
I agree with that also. I went to back to New Orleans and did CE at Xavier University, and that's exactly what it was on. So I'm hoping we can start getting information.
Christine?
Hi. I work for an analytical laboratory, and I am asked all the time if we can test CBD. And so I did a little research on laboratories that can, and there's several in California, and they actually give what we call a certificate of analysis, measuring CBD, all the components, THC. And so some of these sites actually say, make sure your products qualify for California regulations. So there's a lot of them out there.
Thank you.
On with my report.
All right. Go ahead, Alan.
That was the most exciting.
Was that the high or low of your report?
This is going to be hard to follow. Okay. Number 10, discussion and consideration of board enforcement statistics. Okay, during the June 2018 committee meeting, members directed board staff to include the following data elements into enforcement statistics. Proof of abatements requested, average investigation time, cease and desist orders, and unlicensed activity. Attachment 7 contains statistics describing the enforcement activities of the board. During the first quarter of the fiscal year, The board has initiated 773 investigations, closed 772, and has 1,889 pending. The board has denied 9 applications, issued 79 letters of admonishment, and issued 425 citations and fines. Referred 67 investigations to the Office of the Attorney General. The board was also granted restriction on 2 licenses pursuant to Penal Code Section 23. Okay. Number 11, during May 2018 board meeting, the members voted to pursue a statutory proposal to incorporate USB compounding chapters into the board's requirements for compounding drug preparations. As part of the discussion, the board noted that the 2 compounding chapters, 795 and 797, are in the process of revision, and USP 800 has been finalized, but it's not yet in effect. Subsequent to that meeting, the recognition of the large and pending policy work that will be required, President Law bifurcated the Enforcement and Compounding Committee into separate committees. Provided below is the membership for the respective committees. Enforcement Committee remains the same. Compounding Committee has Stan Weiser as chair, Shirley Kim, Victor Law, Alan Chedd, and Maria Serpa. I'm not going to go into that right now. As anticipated, the Compounding Committee will begin its work in 2019. Okay, future committee meeting dates. For the Enforcement Committee is December 13, March 14, July 2, and September 25. Compounding Committee to be determined.
All right.
That's the end.
Any more public comment? Well, thank you very much, Alan. I know there's a lot of work. Just want to tell you guys that we do open our ears. We listen to you guys when this could be done, and we're trying the best, to try to correct some things that has not been done in the past. Okay, so thank you all. All right, thank you, Alan. Let's take a break before we go any further, right? I know it's a long meeting. Okay, let's take a break.